Hello everyone and welcome to The Back Pocket, the podcast that is just as inconsistent as Damien Barrett's opinions in the Sliding Doors column. My name is Alistair and as always I'm joined by Jack, who is across from me. How you doing?
I'm here and it is football time
It's
tomorrow by the time this comes out.
It's not football time. You duped me. I
yeah.
thought we were not recording until after the week.
I'm sure I said to get ready for round one, but maybe I said after round one and... One of our memories is wrong. That's all I know. But it's 2 days till season starts. I'm waiting for teams to come out before I base my opinions on anything. I think there's lots of teams who are probably talking about players who are injured who will play, and vice versa as well, players who aren't quite ready that they've said will be. So
yeah, Richmond just announced that pretty much everyone who had an injury cloud is ready to go, but for some reason I doubt that.
Yeah, there's not a much chance that Freo had a similar thing. A bunch of their injured players like, oh yeah, they're all on the training track. It's like, yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything. Like players train for months while they're injured.
Mm-hmm.
All I know is Sam Menegola is having knee surgery, so he's not back.
Bad knee surgery?
I don't know. I haven't seen
just a
enough about it.
clean-up?
I think it's just a clean-up, but like
that's not too bad.
For someone who missed most of last year to injury and then just got back and played in one final and rough times. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We'll do just some pre-stuff this week. So I want to run you through predictions first. Off the bat, who's your pick for the Scarlet Silvani medal this year?
That's a tough question. Yeah, might surprise Braden Campbell.
Oh yeah,
sneaky. I reckon his
off half back.
Reckon his nuggety build with his really ridiculous speed might grow on us
like
a
Jack Sinclair-esque season.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay.
I think that's a smoky. But if I'm talking about someone who, if their form continues, maybe Sam Collins. If they push for finals, that's a chance.
If they get enough wins on the board, I think is the big one for them, right?
He's their best defender. So
mine is Darcy Moore. I
that's
reckon
a good
with
choice.
The captaincy, a full year under his belt last year, which is unlike him for the amount of injuries he's had. I'd like to see it, and as long as they don't try and throw him forward like they did for 3 or 4 games last year.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it was someone from Freo either.
Yeah,
whether it could be Cox or Ryan or Pierce.
Yeah, in the write-up I put out for Freo on the website the other day, I was saying how like most teams, if they lost someone like Griffin Logue, they'd leave a massive hole, but he couldn't even get a run in the back line last year and had to play out forward. So who knows with them? I'm keen to see how they go this year because they're like the opposite of Brisbane, who've had their like attacking game down pat, but have had to fix up the defensive game, whereas Freo definitely had everything defensive structures fine last year. They're the hardest team to score against once you got it inside 50, close to the hardest team to score against in general, but couldn't get the attack going the other way when it really mattered. But
I think another possible sneaky choice might be Liam Jones. No real recognisable names down there besides Keith, who had a down season.
Yeah,
he's flashy.
Depends on whether they play Darcy,
King.
I think will be a big part of it. If Darcy plays forward, then Jones will have a lot of responsibility.
Yep.
And yeah, marks well, spoils well. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
It'll be good for the Bulldogs to get some votes on the board.
Yeah, oh my goodness, it took them so long last year. Despite the fact that we were just hoping for it.
It's because we kept going, Bailey Dale's been playing in the middle as well, so it doesn't count.
Dale had a weird season last year. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they go. They don't have Shaki this year down there, so that's an improvement, I think.
Shaki out, Jones in. That's an improvement, even if you take age into account.
Watching that Shaki interview where he was like, the reason he left was because he felt like it was offensive that Ugle-Hagan was getting games ahead of him despite the fact he thought he was playing better. I was like, I watched Ugle-Hagan as a 20-year-old win games for that club.
He's kicking that game against Melbourne. He kicked like 5 goals.
Yeah. And that handball he did over the top without looking...
and that's his, second season?
Second or third? Yeah, he's a better footballer than Shaki already.
As long a time as Wiedering.
Yeah.
Remember they were 1 and 2. So
and you were freaking out before the season started that you're going to pick up Shaki.
I remember.
Yeah, I thought that was a weird call, but no, it is what it is. All right, so
are we doing all the predictions? Are you going to make me pick a premier?
If you want to pick a premier, you can. It's a goofy one.
Oh yeah, North.
Yeah, I'll pick Hawthorn.
Nah, North v Hawthorn for the grand final would be. It would be wild simply for the fact that, one, no one expects either of those two teams to do anything, but also Clarko v Mitchell in the grand final would be incredible.
That would be great, actually.
That's a story.
Yeah.
But I think the two standouts for me at the moment, and I know you're going to be like, But why didn't you say Geelong? I think Brisbane have had a really good preseason, and I think Sydney have started with a fire under them. So early on, their form is both of those teams are looking quite good. I'm not saying that they will win everything, but I think they've set themselves up.
I'm always hesitant with Brisbane. I've talked about this in the past.
Yes,
I think
of course.
They really struggle at the point end of the year. Last year they made a prelim, which is for them huge considering where they've gone the last few years. But I have to see a bit more from them to think that. Sydney, I agree. I think there's stats about teams not backing up after losing a grand final by that much. But Sydney are one of the only teams that have done it.
I think they're fine.
Are such a professional football team and have been for so long. They're rarely bottom out, always challenge. So I think Sydney, but I also think Melbourne again. I think
under the radar.
I think there's a layer of they may have lacked that hunger when it mattered last year, where a Geelong team that needed it, like it was like a last chance need, and a Sydney team that was young and had a fire under them, just kind of stormed past them. I think Melbourne was still probably close to the best team in the comp last year, and they've added Grundy to their list. That's realistically should still be a very, very good football team.
I think one thing with Brisbane, and it's the same with the Bulldogs, I think both those teams are capable of getting really far in finals, but until their mids start running defensively, it becomes impossible for them to win. But I've seen a little bit better from Brisbane over the preseason.
Speaking of the crossover there, Dunkley moving to the Bulldogs should help them as well, because he is defensively and attackingly
moving to
offensively,
Brisbane.
Very good. Moving to Brisbane from the Bulldogs, I think offensively and defensively he's a very good midfielder, and he'll help play that role in that midfield as well with Ashcroft.
Yeah, and that's one of those that'll make an immediate impact. He's set himself up to have a Dykos or Selwood or Walsh kind of first season.
He looked ridiculous. Like that preseason game we talked about it last week, absolute rubbish, but Ashcroft looked phenomenal.
Yeah, he was everywhere. And I know obviously your younger players are more inclined to try in those preseason games, but
it's their first chance to really prove themselves.
I don't think he didn't really look like he was breaking a sweat. So
there was a point where he was he ran away from Buse, who is quick and like the way he plays on the smalls, and kept up with Holmes, and I was like, oh, okay, terrifying. Like that's an 18-year-old who is that fast and that strong. That's
with a first preseason under the belt.
Definitely.
I think those four teams mentioned, Sydney, Brisbane, Geelong, Melbourne, are all probably going to be up and about top four.
That's your top four again, isn't it? You want Freo. If Freo don't make top four, I think they should be disappointed. They really had one hand on it for all of last year.
I think a lot of people are predicting them to slide, which is crazy because we saw it in the preseason, and that's just preseason form, but I feel like Nathan Fyfe playing as a well-drilled and trained forward could be really dangerous.
Lob out Jackson in is a gain, right?
Yes, I think so. I worry if it ruins their dynamic. I don't think Jackson's as good a forward as Lob is.
No, but Taberner, if he stays fit,
that is very true. If he stays fit and is picked in the team, which is another problem.
He was probably the story of the year last year, wasn't he? His first half of the season was brilliant, and then as they started to slide, he just went missing. He got dropped in the end, didn't he?
They dropped him. They played Amos in front of him. They played the big kahuna every now and
then.
Real
fall from grace to someone who was in good form.
And who has been their key forward for years and
their best forward in that team for a long time.
After they swapped coach and Ross Lyon was out, I remember him just being in career best form and going, hold on a minute, with Chera and Brayshaw and the one whose name I forget. Sarong, and delivering to him, this looks dangerous, and it was, and then it just stopped.
Yeah, and then it kind of went nowhere, but and if he can regather some confidence, I think it's probably the main issue with him. I see that being a good for them having that up forward. But Fyfe, Taberner, Jackson is scary for backlines. That's I wouldn't want to be matching up on that at the best of times.
No, I wouldn't either.
And if Schultz plays anywhere near the footy he did last year as well, that's also a nightmare. That's headaches.
Yeah, and I mean Walters is still about. He had some really good games last year. Kind of proved a couple of doubters wrong, but I'm not convinced he can do it.
No, I think that
which is why I think Fyfe up
his
forward
consistency was still
important.
Poor. Yeah, Fyfe could very well have a great season.
I think of him in the vein everyone goes, oh well, one day a non-key forward will win the Coleman. Someone like Fyfe or Toby Green play that taller but still agile. I wouldn't call Fyfe exactly agile, but he's crafty.
Yes.
He's
good below the knees. Is strong.
So I think someone like that could potentially, not that I'm calling that because that's a ridiculous call. But Freo, they could finish top 4. They could finish like 10th.
Yeah, so. I think like we saw it last year, and not even going through the season. At the end of the year, 10th to 5th was minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're set for another year like that,
yes,
which is, and they're the best years for a viewing standpoint, like where every game really means something, unless you're West Coast or North last year, really, the only teams that...
Well, I think that was the reason why it was so tight. We had West Coast, North, Hawthorn and Adelaide who were all down the bottom, and even Essendon for a long period there that were just non-competitive. Yeah. I feel bad saying that about Adelaide, who really challenged sides, and Hawthorn, who were tactically sound and beat some good sides too.
Hawthorn knocked off, obviously, Gold Coast at the end of the year and ruined their finals chances. Obviously beat Geelong early in the year and had a few really close games with good sides.
But the fact that all of those teams had 5 wins and less.
West Coast and North had 2 each.
Yeah, it really stacked the top.
GWS were another one last year.
Yeah.
Were really lacking. I can't see them doing as badly this year, despite...
GWS?
Yeah, I think they'll be more middling. I think last year was a shock for them. Like that, they made a semi-final the year before, and competed for years before that. I think they're still they lost Taranto, but their midfield was so stacked that shouldn't be a huge loss for them.
They lost 2 of them, didn't they?
They did. They lost
Hopper? No.
Hopper, yeah.
Yeah.
But they've still got Green, Kelly, Cornelio. Didn't want to come out. So I think they've still got a strong midfield. Their ruck's a big issue, I think. Bruce is always injured. And
Flynn?
Yeah, Flynn. I don't see that being sustainable, but teams have done well without great rucks
before. Yeah, of course. A ruck is 90% of the time superfluous.
I actually really like what the AFL's done with the round 1 fixturing this year. There's a few staples. Obviously, Port and Brisbane have played round 1 for a while. And obviously Carlton and Richmond have been the opening game, or at least the Thursday night game when they decided to change it last year for years. But I think after the games they had last year, Geelong Collingwood's a great choice. I like that they've gone West Coast and North as a matchup. Just the 2 teams that could barely get a win last year, put them together in round 1.
Opening day of Saturday footy too, which is fun.
Hawthorn Essendon, obviously they try and pretend that's still a rivalry all these years on. But the one I really love is to finish off the week, to round things out, the St Kilda Freo Ross Lyon matchup.
Yeah, which I think is funny because it's fake. It's a fake drama.
Yeah, it is. It is. I keep forgetting that really happened. That Ross Lyon is a coach this year, because I also remember when they gave Richardson a 3-year contract extension in the middle of last year.
Richardson, you mean Ratton?
Ratton, sorry,
They did the same thing to Richardson. They did the same thing with Richardson,
sorry, yeah, but Ratton. To Ratton they gave him a contract extension in the middle of the year, and then they're like, oh, actually...
St Kilda are doing the opposite trend that a lot of clubs are doing. A lot of clubs are giving their coaches more and more time, and St Kilda are cutting them off the legs within 2 years.
I know that, it was a disappointing finish,
2 or 3 years.
Surely they had to look at how they started last year before just sacking Ratton completely.
It was very, and we talked about this last year, it was really weird for them to re-sign him after one win,
after a few losses,
weeks
5
and
losses
weeks
in a row.
of terribleness. And then when they went back to being bad again...
Yeah, it seemed like it was a see out the 1 more year in his contract and let it slide kind of thing. And they just did 2 knee-jerk reactions in opposite directions. And now all the injuries they've got, they're kind of in no man's land again.
Yeah, no recognisable forwards at the moment, which is a struggle. Because when you watch St Kilda, the way they win, and obviously Paddy Ryder is no longer there for them, they win based off Rowan Marshall's freak ability around the ground, and then players like Membry and King outsizing and outjumping their opponents. And without that, they're relying on smalls that I don't think are quite up to scratch.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously Steele's massive for them. I think he's probably their most important player still, but
I think Sinclair's more important. Without his run, they're in trouble.
Yeah, I think they're another one of those teams, and we've talked about this about a few teams. It's just the who backs up the talent. Like their main talent is very good, and we know that. But the next level below, and especially the depth players as well. When even the players who aren't probably top 8 best 22 material get injured, and someone who's even lower than that, like is properly VFL standard, comes in. We saw it with Essendon a couple of year ago when their best 22 started to get injured and those players came through. They just weren't up to scratch. And I do worry that St Kilda's going to be... I know they already finished 9th or 10th last year, but I worry they're going to slide quite heavily this year as...
Could do.
Gold Coast and Port push up as they should. Maybe even Adelaide,
definitely push for top 8, if not top 4.
The Port-Brisbane game is really good, I think, for Port. Not necessarily to get a read on them, because round 1's always hard for that anyway. But if Port can win that game, they will have so much more belief compared to the start they had last year. It's at home. They almost beat Brisbane in Brisbane round 1 last season. I'm really interested to see how that game goes for both teams' fortunes for the year. And to watch Ashcroft tear it up. That's an 18-year-old.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Ashcroft playing on Horn Francis, maybe? Or is Horn Francis injured?
Kane Cornes would have a field day.
Yeah, his tunes changed quite a bit. All right, so I guess we really did predict a wooden spoon when we just said Hawthorn North, didn't we? It's going to be one of those.
It's got to be one of those two. I can't see anyone else getting close.
Adelaide are going to improve.
West Coast can't be as bad as they were last year.
Improve. West Coast won't be as bad.
It's not even last year. That was the frustration, was that as soon as they couldn't make finals, they started playing watchable football and won a few games. It just showed that their confidence was shot, and as soon as they weren't playing for anything...
It was still attacking, non-defending football.
Yes, it was.
Wasn't good.
It was.
So, yeah, we'll see what Brad Scott brings to them. He did a really good job with a limited North side.
We really saw the difference it made. I mean, where they've been since he got sacked is nowhere. They've barely won more than 5 games a year since he's been gone.
And they've had 7 coaches since then.
Yeah. I think that he is a good coach. I don't know if he's a great coach, but he's a better coach than it seems like they've had for a while. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes. And North seem to have a better coach in terms of coaching ability. Whether that is a great choice in terms of the fact that the racism saga is still not concluded and he's at the club, I feel like the biggest worry is that if that blows up in the middle of the year and he gets a ban put on him, you've got another North coach gone in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And they're just knee-deep in it again through something that could have been fixed if they pushed through this report faster and actually worked out what they were going to do about it.
It's a big smudge all over the season right now.
Yeah.
And it felt similarly about Essendon, and the AFL pushed that as much as they could so it didn't affect in season. And it got to a point where they had to...
You wonder if they'll wait until whether like the bye week before the finals this year or something to actually release it.
Look, there's no chance in hell North are going to get
near the finals.
No. So they don't have to worry about that point. But it is going to be very interesting.
It's so strange. Did you see South Fremantle got done for salary cap cheating in that?
I did not see that.
So 2021, when they made and lost the grand final to Subi, the reports came out and they got done for salary cap. They got docked 2 games for this year before the season starts.
How much were they over the salary cap?
I don't know. I didn't see what the actual figures were.
I know it shouldn't matter how much, but they still broke
they've been docked 2 games before the season starts.
Rough start.
Oof. Yeah.
All right, so what other things can we predict? It's really asinine.
Well, I was going to say who your improvers, but you've already said Adelaide.
Yeah, Adelaide and Port.
Adelaide, Port and Carlton are the 3 that I think should improve.
I'm a bit iffy about Carlton.
I know that. I think the slider, and not necessarily because I think they're going to slide in terms of quality, but I think the slider in terms of ladder position has to be Collingwood.
It has to be.
You just can't win 9 out of 12 games by less than 2 goals.
We were wrong last year.
They just kept doing it. But then they lost 2 games in the finals, but the close margins against both Geelong and Sydney.
But if it swaps, they might win like 7 and 13.
And then win the finals ones. Who knows?
Who knows?
But all we can say is McRae has them playing really exciting football. And credit to him.
It will be interesting to see if teams pick them out a bit more.
I saw him use the most memeable quote of all time today, where he said like he considers them him and his 44 sons. And my immediate thought was like, don't talk to me or my 44 sons ever again. But yeah,
he's got a couple of bad eggs in there.
He's got a few bad eggs, but he loves all of his family.
So Collingwood I predict to potentially slide. Another one I'm so unsure of is Richmond. I think they could go top 4.
They really could go either way. If they're
down.
More aging players.
I think McIntosh is a huge loss for them.
Oh, massive. Much like Edwards.
They still have a lot of talent all over
Taranto coming in and Hopper coming in is huge, but there's just so much age on that list now.
I think the main thing that fixes for them is their reliancy on Prestia. When Prestia goes down, they have big issues.
Yeah, every time they lost him, it was a big hole.
And they filled it in one game with Baker, and that went really well for them, the Geelong game.
Yep.
But a couple of other times he went down, they just had nothing.
But Baker was very good for them last year.
And he's someone who should improve.
A new player in terms of how he played compared to previous seasons. Bolton's obviously a generational talent. And I expect him to have another good year. His best is very good, but when he kicks 1 goal 5, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest problem for Richmond is...
No Castagna, though.
There's a lot of age down back.
Yeah.
In the sense that Broad's 30 this year, I think a couple of months' time. Vlosten would be probably 31. Grimes is a very similar age bracket. So most of their backline is aging. And that is a problem because the whole point of this podcast is that you build good teams on defence. And when you have that kind of age profile, if all of those players are a step slower, if it happens all at once, then you're left with a lot of leaks.
I thought they drafted to get around that a little bit.
Well, but how long do keys take to come on? Like, it doesn't happen immediately.
Gibcus has played a lot of games already, and Bolter can hold down defence.
Yeah.
So if you've got those two as your keys and you work around the smalls around it, obviously...
Gibcus, when he was forced to play man-on-man, got made look a bit goofy last year.
It was his first season.
Yeah, I know.
Not everyone can come in first season as a key and kill it.
Yeah, almost no one does.
No.
Pretty much ever.
Like Sam de Koning, second season he played...
But it was also his fourth year on a list.
Oh, I thought fourth year?
He was 21 last year.
Oh, well, I thought it was only his second.
Yeah.
Anyway, Wiedering did well in his first season and terrible in his second. Moore played pretty well in his... He played forward, though, didn't he?
Yeah. His first season in back, he played well.
Yeah.
Again, it's hard.
It's rare.
And key forwards don't play that well at young ages either. Like, it's one of those things where the bigger players just take until they're 22, 23 to come on, usually.
Like, even with a year under his belt, and the fact that he played senior footy can make a difference.
Yeah.
There. I think he and Bolter can make...
With the exception of Sam Darcy, who just looked a natural talent down back last year. It was ridiculous.
So, yeah, that'll be interesting. Do you have any predictions about potential Brownlow and Coleman winners?
Oh, that's just a...
It's impossible,
Coleman, right? Considering that key forwards are probably the most injury-prone players in the AFL, but also the fact that a player can just suddenly have that year. Like...
I'm going out. I'm picking Fife for both.
Fife for both? Oh,
yeah.
If he wins the Coleman, he'll win the Brownlow.
Yeah.
That's... Like, I think you can lock that in. If he wins the Coleman...
win
15
games. To 16 games, so that works.
Yep.
And he keeps on his average goal kicking of 3 a game.
If he kicks 50 goals and they win 15 games, there's every chance he wins both.
The other one I was going to suggest was, and it's completely gone from my brain, I think Brownlow, I'm tipping Brisbane to win a fair few games this year. Imagine if Will Ashcroft won it in his first year.
And we saw how much it attracts attention in a winning team with Dacos last year. So it's... I think...
well, his main vote stealer would be Neil, right? So I think they'd probably cancel each other out. But boy, it would be interesting.
And Dunkley now.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about Dunkley again.
My main pick for Coleman, if he can stay fit, is Jeremy Cameron. I think if he'd stayed fit last year, he probably would have done it then. He missed a few games with that hamstring again, which is probably the most likely thing to stop it. Brownlow's just hard. I think Taranto has to be my pick. I think that he will take the main role in that midfield, and I think he'll do it well.
That's very interesting.
And I don't think they have to win that many games for him to do it. I think they play such a contested game that it will suit the fact that he loves a hard ball and loves kicking a goal. So, there's a out of the hat pick. Oh, I hope he doesn't because I just can't stand Richmond.
I'm biased, man. I can't think of anything else to predict because I'm dumb.
Yeah, no, me neither. All right. I'm going to hop on your bandwagon from last week and give you a who would win.
Cool. I've got a new segment coming up.
I went as goofy as possible too. I want to know who would win 22 Aaron Sandilands or 22 Caleb Daniels.
Caleb Daniels.
You reckon?
Yeah.
So,
my argument here is Caleb Daniel can tackle, right?
But can one Caleb Daniel tackle Aaron?
Oh,
yeah, I guess 2 can.
You get swarmed by Caleb Daniels, you're done.
It's like the 1,000 rats, right? Like,
So, Caleb Daniels' new nickname for us is 1,000 rats. So, for example, Sandilands wins the hit out. There's no chance. He hits it to another Sandilands who is swarmed by all 4 Caleb Daniels. And he might get his arms free.
But then the next Sandilands is also getting tackled.
He's not agile. His kicking's not fantastic. He's not getting away from 1,000 rats.
I agreed with Caleb Daniel, but I didn't consider the swarm. I didn't think of... it's a beautiful image I've got in my head. Just Caleb Daniels just swarming.
It's a plague of Daniels, which is the name of the episode.
A plague of Daniels. It's like an abundance of... what's it called? An abundance of Catherines. I just thought of the abundance of Danes joke I made years ago.
That's a long time ago.
Dane Beams has stepped down as captain and Dane Zorko is taking over.
So that's. I think it's easily Caleb Daniel.
Yeah, okay. I agree with you, actually.
I mean, the only other way possible is if Caleb Daniel cannot get the arms and Sandilands handballs it all the way down the field. But how's he kicking the goal?
It's a tough one.
He's rushing behinds to win.
He wins like one. Caleb Daniel kicks 1 goal 1 to 1 goal 13 at the other end.
So yeah, I know. I think there's no shot.
Yeah, all right. That was the only one I thought of.
That's the only one you have? I should have come up with some myself. Anyway, I'm stealing. I've got a new segment. It's called "Shit That I Read on Big Footy and I'm Stealing."
It's about time Big Footy got some, other than their own podcast mentions.
A Hawthorn fan on the main board posted a thread about average years to win a premiership.
Right.
So he was saying...
2021. 2021.
What do you mean?
Well, I thought that was an average year to win a premiership.
Yeah, okay. Funny.
Because it was in October and Perth.
He means, like... how many years, your strike rate, essentially.
Oh, how often you should win one.
So he was gloating because Hawthorn are still top of this list. Yep. So I wanted to give you some of the statistics here. On average, it takes Hawthorn, I believe, 7 years.
Is that all-time or AFL era? It could be both.
From they started in the AFL. Right. Because they've split the statistics. So Brisbane Lions have their own section and Brisbane Bears have their own. Okay. So their strike rate is 13.4%, which is the highest in the competition. Essendon is second with 13.01, and Carlton with 12.8. Brisbane are the most recent team with a 12% strike rate.
Brisbane's
so
West
3 and 25.
Yeah.
West Coast is still below Collingwood.
4 in 30.
Just on numbers. They're 4 and 35. Geelong don't make the 10% mark.
No, they've been around the longest.
They've been around too long.
Between 64 and 2007, they didn't win one, which doesn't help your cause.
So yeah,
Melbourne would be the worst, wouldn't it? Oh no, St Kilda.
Melbourne are actually better than Geelong. Melbourne have
they had
10.66.
that run, didn't they, in the 60s?
So they're 13 over 122 years compared to Geelong's 10 over 122. Yep. The one that made me laugh was St Kilda being 0.81%.
Hey, they've won one. They've done it.
It said average years to win, 122. I know that's not how stats work, but that line itself made me laugh.
North. So Freo, GWS and Gold Coast. St Kilda done something they haven't.
You're forgetting University. University didn't win one either.
University and the Brisbane Bears.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting just to see the frequency and...
Yeah. I've always been a proponent of AFL era, mostly because... It was an amateur competition. There was no wage agreements. There was no players' union. It's hard to I don't think that people shouldn't count them because people were rabid VFL fans when it was on, and they passionately cared about those teams. So obviously they count, but the ones that happen today are in a much more even playing field in terms of draft picks, in terms of salary caps.
I have no problem with anyone who says AFL era or anything like that. I couldn't care less as long as the history is remembered.
Yes, it's a balance thing.
That applies to Port Adelaide too. I'm not saying they should have 858 flags or however they.
You have to recognise the fact that they were a dominant side in that competition.
Absolutely.
And without their input and the East and South Fremantle's input, the AFL wouldn't exist as it is today.
Yeah.
When the Waffle and Sandford put all the money into making it a national competition, so it is I get why Port people get so frustrated by it.
It gets really messy.
Yeah, it does, because they didn't play against each other.
Yeah.
Which is the other issue, right? That's why, because there were 10 Victorian teams, those ones do make more sense to compare to each other.
Because they were playing each other.
But, in the same vein, the other teams didn't have a chance to play in that competition.
So it is awkward, but I found it, just weight on numbers alone, that Carlton and Essendon, despite not having done anything in, 23 years...
Still kicking.
Still second and third. So
incredible.
If either of those two teams decide to get on a run, Hawthorn might be dethroned.
We are at the time of year where it's very popular to think that Essendon and Carlton are good. This is the time of year every year where both of those teams, everyone's like, this is the year. It's March every year. They're like, this is it. This is they've been showing signs.
It was very interesting last year. Obviously, Essendon had a bad start to the season. Carlton had a good one. And the way people turned on Essendon
Because they brushed into finals the year before without beating a single top 8 team.
Yeah.
Until the Bulldogs at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then got brushed aside.
And it was suddenly the 6,000 whatever days is going to be...
It comes back so fast, doesn't it?
Going to make it to 5 digits or... we can't make a finals.
Yeah, well, you wonder
it's
how quickly people will turn on... Because I just think with Carlton's injuries, if they lose a couple early... How quickly people are like, it's just going the same way, despite the fact that the list doesn't dictate they will be playing their best football until probably round 5 or 6.
And you also have to take into account their first 2 games against Richmond and Geelong.
Yeah, who are
Premier,
teams that
2 finished above them and just traded in 2 midfield guns.
Yeah.
Their 4 games after that are easy. If they don't make it out 3-3, they're in trouble.
Yep.
3-3 or better.
And I think at the start of the year, that's all you need. I think that you want to go into probably round 8 split.
Yeah.
And then you can build your season from there. As teams have proven in the last few years when they've been written off for being between 7th and 10th at that time of year. I think the Bulldogs did it a few years ago, made a grand final. Geelong were there last year, they were around 5th, I think, at that point of the year after losing to St Kilda and Hawthorn. That's when teams are really building their season. Yeah. They're learning how their game plan they've built in the off-season stacks up, how they can tweak it, what they can get from Ross Lyon's audio, and where they're going to get their season from there. But I just don't think that it's worth looking into teams that early.
No. And it can really... Because AFL...
Especially not this early, David King saying Brisbane are now clearly premiership favourites after their pre-season win.
They're putting so much pressure on sides already.
Yes.
They're expecting Richmond to be top 4. They're expecting Carlton to make finals or it's all over. Essendon have to be better. You're creating the pressure for these clubs.
I think the same
Let them play a month or 2 and then get to it.
It didn't ruin Dacos last year, but the amount of young players, first top 3 draft picks especially, have just not performed, and I think so much of that is due to the weight put on them. I think like a Jat Watts, I think even Horn Francis in his first year at North was meant to save this club that was always going to struggle.
I think Phillips and
Powell
from North are another one.
McGrath, at Essendon is another one. Like, he's a very good footballer, but he's not what they expected him to be. There's so much pressure put on kids who aren't anywhere near their footballing peak yet, so you can't compare them. One that somehow escaped it, and I'm glad he did, is Daniel Rich, who was dominating waffle games at 17, and then has basically stayed at the same level.
He's made a really
he's a very good footballer.
Career.
But like what he was expected to be was a multiple Brownlow medal winning champion, and he's ended up being a very, very good halfback.
Yeah.
And thankfully he's respected in that way, and it might be because he's in Brisbane.
I think that's 100% it. Maybe Ashcroft will escape it just due to that. Yeah,
but you see these young players come through and the media hype, and you're like, that's a child. Like,
if Nick Dacos has a bad second season, if he has his second year blues, it could be...
Kane Corns will be knives out. He'll be sharpening them. But Connor Rozee just gets better with every year, despite the fact that he had second year blues like crazy.
Yeah. He finally showed his full potential last season. And
look, I expect him to have a very good year.
I'm
genuinely good footballer.
I'm gunning for it. I'd like to see it.
He's another great example of that. Like, when you put so much pressure on someone, I worry about De Koning this year after the year he had last year, because especially with the injuries John have down back, that he's going to be expected to do so much.
And it could just be a case where I know it can be done mid-season, but people will have been studying Geelong very closely.
Oh, absolutely.
So I have a feeling players like De Koning or even someone like Brad Close in his efforts up forward could be looked at closer by opposition.
Well, even Myers, who I think got worked out after, I think it was his second year, he had a really good year, got worked out and then kind of changed his game and had another really good year last year. Like, he'll be reinvestigated, and even... teams aren't going to let Cameron do what he did in the midfield again next year. Like, they
are going to be honed in on Atkins.
Yes, for sure.
Fine-tooth comb.
Like, there's even Henry going up forward. Like, there will be plans in place for those, because teams... I hate when you hear this coach doesn't have a plan B. It's like, no, he just clearly didn't have an effective plan B. Like, they've got plans A through, Z, not just one game plan. Because there's so many things you have to take into account.
I watched David Teague coach a lot of football. He only had a plan
Teague, we love the Teague. But yeah, I think it's so weird that they think that, because like, what do they think they're doing?
Yeah.
Like, there's a box full of coaches just all week trying to deconstruct how other teams play and how they're going to react to new pieces.
And stuff happens throughout the game. If the coaches weren't making moves, the middle 4 players wouldn't change.
No.
Your forwards wouldn't rotate. Like...
Ben Mackay wouldn't have played forward for North last year.
Oh, I remember that.
That was so funny. There was leaking goals at the other end of Mackay's up forward dropping marks.
He was just standing there
It was so funny. I do like that I messaged you about it the other night, that as always, like clockwork, early season game, one of the Mackay brothers is injured. This will be the 8th year, 9th
Maybe
year?
you'll get better by round 4.
8th or 9th year in a row that they've not played against each other?
No idea. But yeah.
It's becoming wild.
I know they said it when they were drafted. They said they don't want to play in the same team and they don't want to play against each other.
Podcast now, though, so...
Yeah, well...
Maybe they are friends. It's amazing what CGI can do.
I think finally not living together for 8 years, maybe they like each other again. They've spent enough time apart.
That happens.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Siblings are much easier to tolerate when you don't live in the same house.
No comment.
Parents too, honestly. Like,
if I lived with your dad, I'd kill myself.
Hope you're listening, Dad. Yeah, no, I think about it all the time. Like, I love my parents, but man, I couldn't live with them. I couldn't, all my siblings, to be honest. I could live with Tammy.
I'm not going to lie, I could live with Mum. Easy.
I could live with Tammy.
No question. I would do it in a heartbeat. She needs someone to open jars for her. She's old.
Yeah. What if she needs a jar open in the morning, though?
Oh. We all make sacrifices for the people we love. I think that's
a good place to leave it.
I have a lot more. Trying to think if I saw any other things on Big Footy I want to steal.
Oh, what I did see was that in the best news possible for this podcast, Channel 7 is looking to make Job a permanent feature of Thursday Night Football.
Yes.
Which is just the dream. We could have Jobisms every week.
If we can have Jobisms every week, I'll be
That'd be the best regular segment on the show. Yeah. I love a Jobism.
I think about standus operandus daily.
I love how they like to make the ground look smaller than the ground is. I like the fact that teams want the ground to feel big, but teams make the ground feel small. He's a genius, Job. His dad was a great coach. Was he St Kilda as well? I've had some nightmares.
I think so.
Yeah. Frawley was St Kilda. Dad made some bad picks.
Well, let's see how they go with Ross 2.0.
Ross the Boss 2.0. Well, I mean, he's been their most successful coach of the last 50 years. And that's painful. Well, actually, who was coaching them when they made the lost grand finals to Adelaide?
Don't know.
I've no idea.
Danny Frawley.
Yeah, probably not. I don't think so. He had one of the worst coaching records I've ever seen.
What year was that?
97.
I'm just going to quickly check it because if I don't find out, I'll...
Never know. Ever know. But yeah, I think it was 96, 97 were their back-to-backs. I could be wrong. Could be 97-8.
Stan Alves? I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So he'd be their at least most successful coach since then. What
he coached 110 games, 53 wins, 56 losses, 1 draw.
So Lyon would probably be as successful or more successful than that.
I think more.
So like I get the thought, but as we said last week, football's moved away from the Ross style.
Going back to the same well is an interesting one, especially after the scandals he had. Ross Lyon much more successful, 76-41-4.
I've not seen... I can't remember the last time I saw a team go back to an old coach. It does seem like a weird choice in modern football.
The one I think of is David Parkin.
Yeah.
He came back, won a premiership.
But I can't think of it. Well, maybe it's a successful model then.
Not really. I don't think so. I think Robert Walls might have done it too somewhere.
Oh, God, that's a name I didn't want to hear. It's like reading that Malthouse and Sumich will both be writing for the West this year.
I might look into that and make an addendum next week.
All right. Well, next week we will have votes and football and overreactions to talk about. Not from us, probably. We'll just be here, but
not naming names. Trent Cotchin's gonna flatten someone.
Oh, he can get away with anything. Anything. That was a dropped elbow. That was incredible.
Discuss it next week. Have a good one, everyone.
Boy.